Good to have you with us on this Monday. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. Thanks so much for being here. This morning, the United States is on the brink of a trade war with some of its closest economic allies after the Trump administration imposed tariffs on Canada, Mexico, and China. The measures are expected to come into effect at midnight tonight and could have a major impact on the price of everything from produce to gas. The president announced over the weekend a 25% tariff on most imports from Canada and Mexico and 10% on China. Mr. Trump also said he would definitely slap tariffs on the European Union, though a timeline for that has not yet been set.
Both Canada and Mexico have announced retaliatory tariffs, while China says it will file a lawsuit at the World Trade Organization. The impending trade war is sending shockwaves throughout global financial markets. European and Asian markets tumbled this morning. U.S. markets are expected to follow suit when they open later today. Speaking on Sunday, the president defended his decision to impose these tariffs while warning American consumers that it will be a bumpy road ahead.
We may have short-term a little pain, and people understand that. But long-term, the United States has been ripped off by virtually every country in the world. We have deficits with almost every country. Not every country, but almost. And we're going to change it. It's been unfair. That's why we owe $36 trillion. We have deficits with everybody. We help everybody. We've been helping everybody for years. And to be honest, I don't think they appreciate it. So we're going to change that.
We've got a team standing by to talk about all this and so much more. Let's start things off with NBC News senior White House correspondent Gabe Gutierrez. Gabe, good morning. The president finally following through with his threat of tariffs. Plenty of criticism aimed at this move, and not just from Democrats. So help us understand the president's argument for going through with this and what kind of imports are targeted.
Well, hi there, Joe. Good morning. You mentioned already some of the products that would be impacted, everything from oil to lumber to auto parts. And the president says that he's trying to get some leverage here. The White House pointing out that trade is more than 60% of GDP for both Canada and Mexico, just 25% for the U.S. And so the president believes this is something that needs to be done because, in his words, as you just heard, that those countries are, quote, ripping us off. Now, he's also seeking to tamp down the number of illegal border crossings that come from the U.S. southern and northern border. And he says both countries have not done enough to curb the dangerous drug fentanyl from coming into the U.S. And also, as for China, that a lot of the precursor chemicals come from that country. So the president trying to lay out his case, even though many experts warn that these tariffs will mean more, that the American consumer will have to pay more, Joe and Savannah.
Gabe, we're going to dig into China's response to all this with Janice in Beijing shortly. But talk to us about what we're hearing from Canada and Mexico. How are they reacting, and what plans do we know of retaliation?
Well, already over the weekend, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau saying that there would be retaliatory tariffs here. Also, another 25% tariffs on American goods. And already over the weekend, we've seen Canadian basketball fans booing the American national anthem at a Toronto Raptors game. Also, we've been seeing that at other sporting events. And then over the weekend, Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau spoke out about these impending tariffs. Let's listen.
It will have real consequences for you, the American people. As I have consistently said, tariffs against Canada will put your jobs at risk, potentially shutting down American auto assembly plants and other manufacturing facilities. They will raise costs for you, including food at the grocery stores and gas at the pump.
Mexico's president directed her government as well to look at what she called Plan B, tariff measures as well as non-tariff measures to retaliate against them. Joan Savannah.
Gabe, while we have you, we're hearing from Elon Musk that he and the president now planning to shut down the U.S. Agency for International Development, also known as USAID. I mean, this group focuses on foreign aid, international charities. What more can you tell us about this?
Yeah, Joe, look, the program was started back in 1961 under President John F. Kennedy, and it serves as the U.S.'s humanitarian arm around the world. Well, overnight in online, Elon Musk saying that he would shut it down after speaking with the president, that it was, quote, a ball of worms that was beyond repair. Now, this comes just several days after 5 sources tell NBC News that 2 top security officials at USAID were placed on administrative leave after denying the Department of Government Efficiency, or DOGE, access to some sensitive computer systems. So again, Elon Musk saying overnight that this program, around for decades, would be shut down. Joe and Savannah.
All right, a lot to talk about this morning. Gabe, thank you so much.
Let's take a closer look at China's response to these tariffs with NBC News international correspondent Janice Mackey-Frayer. She joins us from Beijing. Janice, good morning. So we'll ask you similar questions here. We do know China has previously said there are no winners in a trade war, but tell us Beijing's reaction to this 10% tariff and any retaliation plans there like Mexico and Canada.
Well, President Trump has made no secret of his intentions around tariffs on Chinese goods. He followed through on it during his first term, and he talked about it a lot on the campaign trail. This time, the 10% tariffs are on all Chinese goods. That includes the list 4B items that weren't included the last time. So things like TVs, laptops, toys, iPhones. Think about the number of things that are made in China that you use or wear every day. Markets across Asia were down today on this news and the uncertainty of what could be a prolonged trade war. China's Commerce Ministry released a statement over the weekend. It's a national holiday here. Officials are vowing unspecified countermeasures. So it's unclear what they might be, but given the dependence on supply chains here and the time that China has had to think and prepare for this, those measures could sting. Joe and Savannah.
So, Janice, China says it's planning to file a lawsuit with the World Trade Organization. Tell us how that might work and what it could achieve.
It probably won't achieve much, and that's for structural reasons at the WTO, because for years there have been too few judges to hear cases. The U.S. has blocked the appointment of judges since President Trump's first term. So on legal avenues at the WTO, there are limitations. But there are strategic considerations that we should talk about, too, that could benefit China. Critics are saying that the chaos that's being created could push other countries, like Europe, to strengthen trade with China as a counter to what's seen as unreliable trade agreements with the U.S. Remember, too, Beijing has also been investing very heavily in the EV industry and clean energy, solar panels, at a time when President Trump has also said that the U.S. is going to back away from those types of investments. So Beijing is saying it still wants a stable relationship with the U.S., but China is saying that these tariffs, are a serious violation of international trade rules. Joe.
Hey, Janice, I also want to ask you about something we just discussed with Gabe, because it's also one of the reasons why the president says he's imposing tariffs on China. He's accusing the country of producing and sending fentanyl or the components used in making it to Mexico and Canada, and then he says that comes into the U.S. What is China saying about that particular accusation?
This move of President Trump to invoke national security to unravel long-standing trade agreements is China takes exception to this and to the accusation that it's been doing too little to stop the flow of fentanyl. The Ministry of Public Security released a statement today saying China was the first country in the world to officially schedule fentanyl-related substances as a class in 2019. The Foreign Ministry also added to that today, fentanyl is an issue for the U.S. In the spirit of humanity and goodwill, China has given support to the U.S.'s response to this issue. The U.S. needs to view and solve its own fentanyl issue in an objective and rational way instead of threatening other countries with arbitrary tariff hikes. That from the Chinese Foreign Ministry. Beijing has long said that if the U.S. wants to control the opioid crisis, it has to look at demand and, in China's eyes, not put the blame on other countries. Fentanyl has actually been one of the few areas where China and the U.S. have had talks and progress in recent years. I've talked extensively with the former U.S. ambassador about this. He had said that talks have always been directly linked to bilateral relations, and he warned just last month that if tariffs were tied to fentanyl, then China would simply walk away from talks. Joe and Savannah.
All right, Janice, thank you very much.
Let's talk about your wallet here. Investopedia editor-in-chief Caleb Silver is here with more on what this could mean for just your money. So when we look at these three countries, Canada, Mexico, China, last year made up nearly half of all imports into the U.S. Let's start with Where are we going to see the impact right now?
Well, everywhere from the grocery store to the car dealership to filling up your car at the pump, because basically everything is going to have a tariff slapped on it. When you think about what we import from these countries, Mexico, it's a lot of fruits, it's a lot of vegetables, obviously. It's also a lot of car parts and some natural gas. When you think about Canada, we're talking about obviously timber, we're talking about natural gas and oil. You saw a 10% carve out there for Canadian oil. Very interesting in this tariff thing. That's the one thing that has smaller tariff on it, but also a lot of frozen potatoes, lots of grain, lumber, and steel. And then China, this is an everything tariff. We already have about $360 billion worth of tariffs on Chinese imports from the first Trump administration that the Biden administration added to. So basically everything, you're looking at this costing consumers anywhere from $500 a year to $1,500 a year in extra cost. At this point, we haven't seen too much retaliation news yet. As soon as that starts, these prices could go up.
Caleb, you mentioned tariffs in his first term. The last time that President Trump did this, if we look back there was a study from the Federal Reserve. It found that there was a loss of American manufacturing jobs, which is interesting, and also these higher prices that we've been talking about. When would ripple effects like that start to happen, and explain those ripple effects to us?
When you think about the S&P 500, the 500 biggest companies in America, half of their revenue comes from exports to other countries. So if you get retaliatory measures there, that's going to increase their production costs over there, but it also increases their import costs for all the products they make here in America. And what do? They pass them on to the consumers, and either we end up paying the price with higher inflation, or we tap out, and that slows economic growth. So tariffs have this consequence where you get retaliation. We've already heard Canada talking about taxing agricultural products, alcohol, that's whiskey and bourbon, apparel, footwear, cars, and EVs. That hurts American exports as well, and it hurts jobs. It slows growth, and it messes up the supply chain, because all of a sudden, companies are wondering where they're going to get their materials from. Do they need to resource from other countries? How about their exports? This could be a supply chain nightmare for the first 6 to 12 months of this, depending on how long it lasts.
Let's talk about the stock market reaction. Last week we had a rough day on Wall Street. That was related to tech. This is not going to be that. What do we expect to see today, and where do we expect to see?
When you look at the futures right now in the stock market, it is concentrated in the Dow Industrials. We're talking about big car companies here, big pharma companies here, obviously, but companies that do a lot of exports to other countries. You're already seeing Dow futures down several hundred points. This could be one of those bad days on Wall Street again, because there's a lot of uncertainty here, and uncertainty is kryptonite for investors. We usually sell first and ask questions later. You're seeing a lot of that right now, but this is just beginning.
Yeah, I was going to say, is this the type of thing where it could be 1 or 2 rough days, or it could just keep going if a trade war keeps going?
Yeah, an escalating trade war could make this even worse over time, but right now investors are just selling in Asia, in Europe, and here in the United States before the market opens. Could be a rough one today.
All right, Caleb, thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's switch gears now. So this morning, the fear of mass firings is swirling to the FBI, with some agents even preemptively packing up their desks.
This unease comes after President Trump publicly praised the firings of 8 top FBI career executives. The Trump administration is quickly trying to reshape the agency shortly after granting those sweeping pardons to the January 6th rioters.
For more, we are joined by NBC News Justice reporter Ryan Riley. Ryan, good morning. So in a message to staff members over the weekend, acting FBI director, this is Brian Driscoll, he said that he had been told to turn over the names of every FBI employee involved in investigating January 6th rioters. Talk to us about the impact this is having within the Bureau and what we're hearing from the agency. How are they responding?
Yeah, that's a lot of individuals who worked on those cases, because you're talking about, more than 1,500 criminal cases that were brought. That doesn't include all the investigations that were done, which is over 2,000. More than 3,000 people stormed the Capitol altogether. And every step of the way, you have FBI employees who were involved in those processes, whether it be from just like helping effectuate an arrest to whether it be, actually the lead agent on a case, or a supervisor or something of that nature. So you're talking about a really large group of people. And remember, as much as we've gotten away from the reality about what the FBI is, it's a conservative-leaning organization. So there were definitely components of the FBI that weren't so enthusiastic about investigating these January 6 cases altogether. And those people are going to be on those lists who weren't so enthusiastic, right alongside the people who were sort of really working on this with all of their might. So you're going to have a really large range of people who are going to be impacted by this. It's really crisis mode, I think, at the FBI right now, with a lot of panic about what this means. Although, the acting head of the FBI is standing strong right now and has a lot of support from a lot of the agents within the Bureau.
Ryan, we know some agents have actually been sent a 12-question survey asking about their roles in January 6 cases. What more can you tell us about this survey?
Yeah, and I can't just stress how unusual this is, right? Because you're literally compiling a list of individuals who worked on the largest investigation in American history involving the storming of the Capitol and violent rioters who bashed in officers' heads, used every kind of weapon they possibly could against these officers, dragged them down the stairs. And you're getting individuals who tried to, vindicate the rights of those victims who were brutalized that day, who are now being added to this list. And, this was something that the FBI said it was going to be able to handle, right? I remember there was this email afterwards, right after January 6th, saying, we do big. And now what you had here is because it targeted so many Donald Trump supporters who believed his lies about the election, ultimately 4 years later, this is going to be this major crisis pivot moment for the FBI. And it's a big question about whether or not any FBI agents would ever want to touch a case that remotely had anything to do with even Donald Trump supporters at this point. I think the chilling effect that this has on the Bureau really can't be overstated.
Ryan, this is all playing out, of course, while the Senate weighs whether to confirm Trump's pick for FBI director. That's Kash Patel. What is he saying about all this?
Yeah, so, the timing is really fascinating here because he got in that hearing before this sort of purge started. So if this had happened before, even though these are a lot of people he's affiliated with, he claimed that he didn't, know a lot to do with the leadership that was being put into place. But, he made some of those promises at that hearing about the handling of this. It just really shows, I think, how Kash Patel and how Donald Trump continue to have this obsession with January 6 cases and really have these deep grievances about how those cases were handled. Although I should say, Kash Patel did say that he thought that the pardons were wrong for anybody who assaulted a law enforcement officer that day. So I guess he's sort of drawing this separate line. But the practical effect that's happening within the Bureau right now is that a lot of agents feel as though they're being targeted for responding to an attack on America, an attack on their country.
Ryan Riley, thank you very much for joining us.
For more now, we are joined by NBC News senior national politics reporter Jonathan Allen. John, good to have you with us. All right, so in conversations with NBC News, you and your colleagues have done a lot of reporting. Nearly 24 federal workers are describing a climate of fear, confusion, skepticism, and anger since President Trump returned to power. Today just marks 2 weeks since Inauguration Day. Talk to us about the impact all this is having just on workers and the ability of crucial government agencies to function right now.
Yeah, I spoke to one longtime federal government manager who said that what's going on amounts to quote-unquote psychological warfare. Basically, the morale of federal workers is extraordinarily low right now. It's difficult to motivate them. As you said, Alan Smith and I, in reporting this story, talked to more than 24 people who work at various federal agencies. And, it goes from, the president unilaterally attempting to cut off funding for programs that they administer to these daily reminders that they are invited to resign their jobs, which people have described as, basically a form of harassment intended to get them to wear down and decide that they don't want their jobs. So really, like across the board here, you see the firings that you were just talking about at the FBI. Similarly, people were put on leave at the U.S. Agency for International Development. Elon Musk said over the weekend that they want to fold AID into the State Department, or basically abolish USAID altogether unilaterally. So we're going to see some, I think, a whole lot of court cases, but some of what's going on will stand. And it is deeply demoralizing at best for thousands, well, really probably millions of federal workers.
John, in your reporting, part of this is in an article that you wrote for NBCNews.com. You specifically wrote that Trump is waging war against his own government and primarily using two little-known agencies. Explain that to us. What are they? How's he using them?
Sure. The Office of Management and Budget is basically the White House's budget office. We saw the first sort of big use and then kind of walk back from the OMB. That was the order to freeze funding for foreign and domestic programs. And then the White House, having touched a hot political stove, pulled that memo from the Office of Management and Budget back. The underlying executive order that put it in place is still there, which has left, according to Senator Chris Van Hollen, Democrat of Maryland, who I spoke to, represents thousands of federal workers, said that basically managers, supervisors are now in a position of having to choose between the president and the law. And so that's the Office of Management and Budget. They're basically the White House Budget Office, the green eye shade folks. And then the Office of Personnel Management is effectively human resources for the federal government. And Elon Musk and his allies have taken over the Office of Personnel Management. And so they're sending out these messages that tell people to resign every day.
All right. Jonathan Allen, we know you'll stay on it. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Well, investigators in Philadelphia say they have found the so-called black box cockpit voice recorder from the medical transport jet that killed 7 people in a fiery crash on Friday night. Information on the device is expected to play a key role in figuring out the cause of the deadly incident. NBC News correspondent Emily Aketa has more on the discovery of this critical piece of evidence.
New images of the force of impact from the deadly plane crash in northeast Philadelphia. Investigators standing in the crater left behind. That's where they found a key piece of evidence, the cockpit voice recorder that looks similar to this. The medevac plane nosedived less than a minute after takeoff before exploding Friday night. Officials now reporting that furious blast injured 22 people.
5 of the victims remain hospitalized currently, and 3 of them are in critical condition.
Andre Howard's 10-year-old son remains in the hospital after he was struck in the head by metal while in their car.
The way it landed, it was only because he's laid on his sister. It landed right on the right side of his head.
He was protecting his sister.
Yes, and he's my superhero.
It's your superhero.
He's my superhero.
Officials say 7 people died, including all 6 Mexican citizens on board the Learjet 55. A family friend remembering Lizeth Maria Osuna as a warrior for her daughter Valentina. The young girl was receiving treatment at Shriners Children's Hospital for 4 months and finally returning home on Jet Rescue Air Ambulance. The company says it flies 600 to 700 flights a year and has had 1 other fatal crash in its 27 years of operating.
Any accident is cause for concern, but in terms of medevac airplane accidents over the past few years, it's been fairly stable. They're very safe. That's why they get a lot of attention when they do occur.
And that cockpit voice recorder was recovered just beyond those police cars in a crater 8 feet deep. The NTSB also found both of the plane's engines and a warning system that they say will provide additional flight data. Back to you.
All right, Emily, thank you.
Time now for a check on your morning news now. Monday forecasts, including the latest on a cold front that's crossing the Great Lakes into the Northeast today.
Meteorologist Denise Isaac got the polka dot memo, and she's with us this morning. Hey, Denise, good morning.
Good morning, Savannah and Joe. Well, this morning we are tracking snow showers from Bismarck into Minneapolis as well as northern Michigan, and that front will eventually slide towards the northeast this afternoon and into this evening, bringing accumulations anywhere between 1 to 5 inches of snow and also some much colder air behind that cold front. So here's a snowfall forecast through Tuesday, anywhere between 1 to 5 inches possible, especially across the higher elevations. And even though the northern tier is talking about cold, the deep south has nothing to do with that because we're flirting with record highs. San Angelo, Texas, 85 degrees is the forecasted high today. That will break the previous record of 82, while Dodge City, 75, previous record of 77, and Denver will be tying the previous record of 70 degrees. While out west, we are dealing with an atmospheric river. Plenty rain is expected across California. We have a soaking system here that will impact Northern California this morning into the afternoon. Flooding is possible around Chico, Redding, and also Santa Rosa. Then by tomorrow, that system brings even more rain across central California. The Bay Area will be at risk for flooding, and over Northern California, we'll be dealing with some snow as well as Washington and Oregon. And then by Wednesday, there is a possibility for some rain across Southern Cal, which will be great news after the wildfires in December and early January, with rainfall amounts up to 1 inch possible. So as we take a look at how much rain we could get from this system from now all the way through Wednesday, some locations 5 to possibly 7 inches of rain. So mudslides a possibility. And when it comes to snow, 18 to 24 inches of snow possible, and some locations locally could pick up 36 inches of snow or even more. Back to you at the studio.
All right, thank you so much.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.